Hello, my name is Peter Snedon, and thank you for watching this talk on why do you stop studying physics. Before we get going, I wanted to thank my colleague Eric Yao, but most particularly Erin Ferguson, who as an undergraduate honours student carried out most of the data collection and data analysis presented in this work. In this talk, I'm going to outline the structure of physics-based degrees at the University of Glasgow, and then we'll have a look at some of the literature that summarises the reasons people choose their courses and indeed choose to change their courses, look at the methodology of the project, the results that we found, and then look at some discussions and conclusions. Now, physics degrees at University of Glasgow are available in two forms. You can have a 4-year BSc Honours or a 5-year MSci. And when the students apply through UCAS, they are given a place in the college, not formally on the actual degree. This is deliberate as it's allowed, flexibility in ultimate degree choice is built into the structure. Most students will normally do 3 subjects in year 1. And then at the end of year 1, depending on how they've done academically, they are free to change their degree. They can also do that to a certain extent at the end of level 2. It's basically their performance here at the university on their degree that determines what options are open to them. So for instance, if a student applies to do a BSc Honours in physics, then in year 1, they could do physics, maths and chemistry. In year 2, physics and maths, and then they would specialise in their degree subject in 3rd and 4th year. But if they've taken physics, maths and chemistry at the end of year 1, they could choose to move to a chemistry degree, a chemical physics, chemistry, maths and physics, theoretical physics. There are lots of options open to them, and that's absolutely fine. It's part of our structure. And in any given year, where we usually have about 170 to 180 students on a physics degree plan, around about 10 opt to move to a different discipline after year 1. And this project was designed to try and find out a bit more about why students chose to make that decision. Now, because students are meeting several different subjects, they're often being exposed to different subject areas. And when we were looking at the literature in this area, what was perhaps obvious was that as students learn more about different disciplines, their opinions of those disciplines change. So a couple of example papers here. Zafar found that the main drivers for changing your degree were because they maybe lost interest in the original subject, or that they gained more interest in another subject. There was also the fact that occasionally they would discover that the subject they had chosen was too hard for them. Liu et al. Found that it was actually more often the positives of the new subject that caused the change rather than negatives in the original subject. Now, overall, we identify 5 broad influences for driving a change in the degree: the course content, gender stereotypes, peers and the wider community at universities, salary and job prospects, and staff. And we're going to look at those. Those were looked at in this project. What wasn't looked at was academic failure. That's another reason why you stop doing a subject, is you can't do it. That was not the focus of this study. The students we engaged with on this had all passed Physics 1, but they then chose not to continue with that discipline. So the approach we took was qualitative, based around interviews and follow-up emails. In academic years 1819 and 1920, we identified 16 students that had moved away from physics. They were all contacted. 5 agreed to take part, who we're going to be referring to as A, B, C, D, and E in this presentation. A to D identified as female, E as male. 4 of them came from one year group, 1 from the other. And they moved on to degrees in chemistry, computing, or statistics. So still within science. It wasn't a vast change, but it was away from physics. And I would just like to make the usual caveat: this is a small data sample, so obviously take care in making any sweeping generalizations with what we present here. Interviews were carried out through Zoom, usually 40 minutes, with a follow-up email to explore some other aspects that came up. Interviews were recorded and transcribed, and then the questions we asked were based on the themes. There's a couple of examples there, and there's a full list at the end if you want to see exactly what we asked them. So in terms of course content, the order here is just alphabetical. So all of the participants felt that course content influenced their decision, but for different reasons. So an example here, student A found the way we delivered the content didn't match with what they wanted. We have multiple modules. We tend to change from one module to the next in each day. There are reasons for that, but clearly it didn't fit well with this particular student. Student C found that it was very hard. The content was harder than they thought it was going to be, and they didn't have the time to process it. Student E similarly felt it was a problem, particularly towards the end of the course. But interestingly, contrasting that, student D actually found the work wasn't difficult enough. There was too much overlap with the advanced higher curriculum. The majority of our students at Glasgow have come through the Scottish system. They apply with the higher, but some students go on to do the advanced higher material, which overlaps to a degree with the first year content at university. Another comment that was raised that we have lab courses and they didn't integrate as well in the student's mind with the lecture content as other subjects did. So there we see that it was that comparison with another subject which where physics suffered. Again, to gender stereotypes, physics is a male-dominated subject, but for the students we spoke to, this was not actually a driver. Student B definitely didn't think it had any influence. They weren't the sort of person to be influenced. They were actually impressed by the number of girls in physics. They say that they thought it was 50-50. Actually, we've hit around 35 to 40% female, which is superb. So we've done a lot of work to try and address this, which might explain why there's less influence. Student C actually felt that the fact that physics was male-dominated would have benefited her because it might have been easier to get a job because she was female, but physics was not for her. In terms of peers in the wider community, student B reported that they had strong connections with their within the physics community, but didn't feel that they influenced their friends. So again, I don't think it made a massive impact on my decision. Student D felt it did help her decision because of the fact she had friends. She learned more about other subjects, in this case, statistics. And then student E found that friends were possibly an influence, but actually it was perhaps because they found it easier. And in terms of salary and job prospects, student A thought it would be easier to get internships in another away from physics and computing in this case. And it might be easier to get a desirable and stable job. Student B said salary wasn't important, but the career opportunities were, and this was similarly brought up with our other students. It was more that they were interested, they wanted to make sure that they had a satisfying, rewarding career. It wasn't the money necessarily, but that their prospects to do well might have been better away from physics. When it came to the staff, all participants reported a very positive experience of interaction with the staff and school. It wasn't enough to stop them leaving physics, but a couple of them reported that it was enough to stop them leaving university. It helped them not to feel overwhelmed by higher education in principle, and which gave them the freedom to explore the possibility of changing subject. So what can we conclude overall from this? Well, in terms of course content and the delivery of that content, these are strong factors. Everyone reported that this was an influencing factor. And in particular, it was comparing poorly with other subjects where we seemed to lose out. So what we can conclude from that is obviously very important to explain clearly why we deliver material the way we do, and indeed why we deliver the specific content that we do. Issues such as an overlap with the advanced higher, that's partly because our entry requirements are set to the higher, but also it allows us to explore the mathematics of physics in much more depth, whilst the students are familiar with some of the content. Future salary itself was not a major issue. However, the job prospects, potential job prospects were. So the students were more worried about making sure they ended up in a job they enjoyed and could do well in, not necessarily to do with money. They also weren't sure where physics could take them. So again, communication is obviously something we have to work on here to make sure that we make it clear to everyone why physics is useful to them. Staff were not a driving influence here. They did not influence the decision to leave. In fact, they were a positive experience that allowed them to feel they could stay at university, which was good. Peers and community, for this cohort, it was not a strong effect. Now, that may be down to these particular students, again, small numbers, but in this case, those were not a strong factor. And gender stereotypes did not influence the female students in choosing to move away. And indeed, they reported that they weren't really even, they felt it wasn't a major issue. Now, that's very good to hear, but it was potentially as a result of a lot of work the school has put in to this issue. And so we must make sure we're not be complacent about this issue. If you're interested, that's the full set of questions that we asked and more detail on the references that I've cited. Thank you for watching and listening to this presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions at the conference itself. Thank you very much.